Hello, class. I look forward to learning from you regarding graduate preparedness for the future and how to assess that this week. If I were a senior higher education administrator charged with developing a framework for evaluating whether my institution is successfully preparing students for the future, I would begin with a simple premise. Student success must be defined more broadly than job placement alone. Student success incorporates intellectual development, civic engagement, social mobility, and workforce preparation, as this week's lecture reminds us. However, with public confidence waning, job placement, including the increase in earning potential, are important components to remind our constituents. Colleges and universities absolutely have a responsibility to prepare students for meaningful employment, but they also have a responsibility to prepare graduates for civic life, ethical decision-making, lifelong learning, and personal resilience in a rapidly changing world. Because of that, I would prioritize three categories of student outcomes: workforce readiness, adaptive and intellectual capacity, and equitable student success. First, prioritizing workforce readiness outcomes, because state policies makers, employers, and families and students all want to know whether a degree leads to opportunity. This would include employment rates, graduate school placement, earnings over time, internship participation, and career advancement. However, I would not define workforce readiness narrowly as did a student get a job within 6 months. Instead, I would evaluate whether the students leave college with the skills to navigate multiple career transitions over a lifetime. Because as we learned in Bridgestock this week, employability is not just about disciplinary knowledge or generic skills, it also depends on career management skills, such as self-awareness, opportunity recognition, networking, and the ability to manage one's own professional development. That's especially important in today's economy, where careers are far less linear than they once were. I would prioritize adaptive and intellectual capacity. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025 emphasizes that the labor market is being reshaped by artificial intelligence, technological change, demographic shifts, and the green transition. Employers increasingly need graduates who can combine technical competencies with analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, creativity, and lifelong learning. In other words, students must be prepared not only for their first job, but also for the reality that jobs, industries, and skill demands will continue to change. For that reason, I would evaluate whether students are developing critical thinking, problem solving, communication, ethical reasoning, digital fluency, and the capacity to continue learning after graduation. I would prioritize equitable student success, because an institution cannot claim to prepare students for the future if its systems only work well for students who already know how to navigate their higher education. This is where my own interest in students with traumatic brain injury becomes especially relevant. Students with traumatic brain injury often experience cognitive fatigue, executive functioning challenges, memory difficulties, and barriers that may not be visible to others. A college could report strong graduation or employment numbers overall while still failing students whose needs do not fit traditional institutional models. So in my framework, student success would also include whether the institution creates conditions in which students with disabilities have equitable access to learning, support, persistence, and post-college opportunity. If success depends too heavily on outside family advocacy or private rehabilitation services, then the institution itself is not fully doing its job. To balance workforce orientation outcomes with broader educational goals, I would organize institutional effectiveness around 4 guiding questions. Are students obtaining meaningful employment and economic opportunity? Are students developing the intellectual and interpersonal capacities needed to adapt in a changing world? Are students prepared to contribute ethically and civically to their communities? Are students, including those with disabilities, being equitably supported in achieving these outcomes? This balance matters because employer expectations themselves are broader than technical skill. In Finley's report, it shows that employers value communication, teamwork, critical thinking, ethical judgment, adaptability, and the ability to learn in real-world settings. Tomlinson this week also reminds us that employability is shaped by multiple forms of graduate capital, including human capital, social capital, cultural capital, identity capital, and psychological capital. That means colleges must prepare students not only with knowledge, but with confidence, networks, professional identity, and the ability to navigate complex environments. To determine whether graduates are truly prepared for life and work after college, I would use a dashboard of evidence rather than a single metric. For workforce outcomes, I would examine employment and graduation school rates, median earnings and career progression, internship, practicum, or work-based learning participation, employer feedback on graduate preparedness, and alumni perceptions of career readiness and mobility. For equity and inclusion, I would include all those outcomes by student group and specifically review whether students with disabilities, including those with TBI, are persisting, graduating, and transitioning successfully into employment or further education. I would look at utilization of disability services, including student satisfaction with accommodation, time to degree, and whether students report that the institution helped them build both academic and career competence. Ultimately, my framework would define a successful institution as one that produces graduates who are employable, adaptable, ethical, civically engaged, and supported well enough to thrive beyond college. Workforce outcomes matter, but they are not sufficient on their own. The true value of higher education is not only that it helps students get a job, but that it helps them build the knowledge, judgment, resilience, and sense of purpose needed to contribute meaningfully to work, community, and life. Thank you, and I look forward to a great week.